All right, Jack Delosa. Welcome to DNMS.WITH.DEAN.
Yeah.
First off, I want to jump in a question because I feel like you go on a lot of these. I feel like these are quite common. I think, what is this, probably the third one today?
Yes, something like that, yeah.
So the first question I wanted to have is I want to talk about your little girl. And when you had her, did that change not only how you looked at yourself, but how you looked at the world around you?
It changed everything. I think a lot of fathers use fatherhood as an excuse to go smaller. And for me, it gave me zero reasons to shrink and every reason to sharpen up. And so for me, it, if someone was to ask me what kind of impact do I want to have on Ariella, my answer to that, in all honesty, is I want to be her hero. Because what I mean by that is I want to be a good example and a good role model that she can look at and respect, because she will adopt and model what she sees, not what she's told. And so it's really important to me to be an example of somebody that really loves her mother and treats her mother really well. To be somebody that's fit and healthy, to be somebody that lives a life intentionally and on purpose and operates with integrity. And so prior to Ariella, my whole world was pretty much business, and now I'm more intentional in every area of my life.
Mm. Yeah, I heard a quote the other day, a good preacher preaches more with his life than his lips.
Dude, that's everything. It's everything. Even in this space as a creator, and a content creator or an entrepreneur or a professional athlete like you are, we live in a culture where it's so easy to say the things. And I think humans and audiences today have a really strong BS filter. And people can tell, is this person talking from lived experience? Can I feel the granite of their character? Have they had sleepless nights over whatever it is they're talking about right now? Or, did this come from a book, or a course that they did, or whatever it might be? And so, a preacher preaches with his life is so fundamentally true.
Do you think there's a big shift now where people are teaching before they've actually learned?
Yeah.
That's a massive trend that seems to come about now. It's almost like you preach these things that you haven't learned, and then you get a following off doing that.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of stuck in this no man's land of like, I haven't actually experienced this stuff. And you kind of like, where do I go from here now?
100%. For me, confidence for me is really determined by competence. And so, the whole modern age thing of look in the mirror and tell yourself you're amazing never really worked for me. It felt inauthentic. Whereas if I want to get good at something, and you talk about this as well, it's reps. And this is the empowering thing about this conversation as well, is you're actually better off learning the thing, doing the thing, and then talking about the thing anyway. It'll be more rewarding and richer and fulfilling for you. And by the time you talk about it, it will resonate more deeply with the right people. But I think what really prevents a lot of people from learning and developing new skills today is we have an addiction to comfort. And whenever you seek to learn anything new, you're going to feel deeply uncomfortable for about 20 hours while you learn it. And so let's say, you're a business owner and you want to learn Facebook ads. You can learn that in about 20 hours. But during those 20 hours, you're going to feel dumb. You're going to tell yourself, I'm not a tech person. Why am I doing this? You're going to feel inadequate. You're going to want to procrastinate. And so it's the people who can endure the learning and then lean into the discomfort of doing to become a practitioner. Their message, that's the preacher that preaches with their life, right? Their message is the one that resonates.
And you actually learn in those times where you are in that discomfort, you are in that point of like, I don't know what I'm doing. What do I do now? You're kind of in that sink or swim mindset.
Dude, that's everything. Like I mean, straight out of the gate where this conversation has gone is kind of like It's my whole foundational outlook on life, which is the number one thing that prevents people from hitting their goals is that we avoid hard. And when you avoid hard, you never take on challenges voluntarily. The only time you grow is when you're outside of your comfort zone. But if you're outside your comfort zone, then by definition, you're going to be uncomfortable. And so it's not about avoiding hard. It's about rewiring your relationship with hard. And counterintuitively, the more you lean into challenging things and the more you lean into hard things, the easier doing hard things becomes.
And also knowing the fact that no matter what you do, something's going to be hard. Like,
exactly.
Do you want to go through something hard and get a reward, or do you want to go through something hard and end up exactly where you are anyway?
That's exactly it. Being, developing the capability and building personal wealth is hard. Being broke is hard. Being married is hard. Being single is hard.
Yeah, it's what hard do you want? Choose
your hard.
Choose your hard, yeah. I heard this thing the other day and it said, it's like, I know it's lonely at the top, but I don't care because it was also lonely at the bottom. So it's like, where do you want to end on that spectrum of loneliness?
Yeah. If you're going to be lonely either way, you might as well be at the top.
Exactly.
Whatever that means for the individual. You know, we all have different ideas of goals and self-actualization, and so it's going to be different for everybody. But I truly think the purpose of life is to voluntarily lean into the challenge of becoming your best self.
And that's going to be hard.
Excruciatingly difficult.
Like, I would always talk to people about what's the difference between nerves and excitement.
Yeah.
And they're both in this grey area of...
Yeah.
And I always think, if I'm nervous about the thing I'm about to do, there's a level of excitement.
Yep.
If there's a level of excitement, there's a level of care. If there's a level of care, it's worth putting effort into.
100%.
And it's almost became a bit of like a North Star where you're like, okay, this is what I need to do. I am nervous about this.
Yeah.
Okay, lean into that.
Yeah.
What's on the other side of that? Because as soon as you do that, man, like you said, like the reps upon reps, it becomes one of those things where you talked about being an athlete or in business. It's like, there's probably always going to be a certain level of nerves because you're always going to be constantly leveling up and wanting to like outgrow your current self. But in doing that, there's that level of like, okay, this has gotten harder and this has gotten harder. But at the same time, it's like, I had this thing. It's like, imagine if you got everything you ever wanted tomorrow, how let down you'd be.
Yeah.
It's like you want to have that progression of like ticking off things that are challenging. So then you go, okay, who am I?
Yeah.
After I've completed this next thing.
Exactly. And that's the most important thing is who you become. And so if you try and shortcut it and pretend like you've achieved something that you haven't, then you're actually robbing yourself of the most enriching component of the journey, which is who you become along the way. Around the reps thing, I've been, I follow your content and you put out a really good video recently around in your mountain biking days, the closer you got to mastery, the more kind of boring it became, right?
Yeah.
And you were talking about, like, for me to get an extra, to carve a second off going down this hill, what's it going to take? It's going to take 5 gym sessions a week. It's, and you listed out everything it's going to take. And it's something that I think there's a lot of misconception around, is that people think that if you're a really successful entrepreneur, business must be easy to you, or if you're an Olympic athlete, then you must find that sport really easy. Whereas the truth is, the Olympic athlete finds their sport every bit as difficult as the amateur, because as they get better, the game they're playing levels up. And growth is actually often not an exponential curve. It's actually the opposite. You get law of diminishing returns. And so in the beginning, you'll be taking huge strides towards becoming better, and you'll feel like you're progressing, and that's really exciting, and it's almost addictive. When you get to a level of mastery, the incremental gains become so difficult to attain that if you have to feel like you're progressing in order to stay with something, you're never going to achieve mastery, because you're going to tap out when you get bored.
Did you find that even within business, obviously when you're starting something, it's that exciting, it's new, it's challenging.
Absolutely.
And then you kind of not win the game, but like you become successful in it.
Yeah.
It's almost like, what now? Did you feel that?
Absolutely. And, there's a couple of resources that kind of pointed me towards the principle we're talking about right now. One is Ray Dalio's book called Principles. It's a really good book about life, business, money. And then also a good friend of mine, a guy called Toby Pierce, was a co-founder of Sweat, which was, one of the most popular.
Toby's recorded here before.
Yeah. Toby's a genius, and he's an exceptional entrepreneur and human being. And he was one of the first people that pointed me to the fact that you do have laws of diminishing returns the better you get at something. And so, I've been in business for 20 years now. And what I observe a lot of business owners doing is they jump from one thing to the next in search of new, because anything that's new has exciting energy and it has quick gains. Whereas if you've been in something, the core engine that sits at in the center of my commercial world is my business called the Entourage, Australia's largest and leading growth agency. I started that in 2010. I've been doing that for 15 years, decade and a half. I love it more today than I ever have. But like anything, like any marriage, like any relationship, like riding a mountain bike, have there been years over the last 15 years where I've been like, getting a bit itchy, should I start something? Absolutely. And I have actually started businesses off the Entourage, scaled them and sold them. But that core kind of foundational business at the center of my world has remained the same.
How'd you keep that fire?
It's like any relationship in that it's exactly the same as a human relationship. So let's say with one's wife or husband. You change, they change, and the relationship as a third entity changes. And so it's so easy to look for new and exciting. Even from a relationship perspective, you can relate that to some things, right? But that's not where the gains are. The gains are in building something with depth that endures. And so how do you stay in it? You need to consistently, let's say every, whatever it is, 3, 5, 7 years, you probably need to reinvent your why to a large, like the person I was when I started the Entourage, I was 23. Can you imagine how many times, like how many evolutions I've been through as a person? How many times I've had to go, well, what's my why now? Well, what's my why now? Well, what's my why now? And then the Entourage also changes and evolves like any sort of organic kind of being, right? And then your relationship with the changes. And so I think it's the intentionality of going, I want to continue this relationship, and therefore intentionally doing the work that enables you to do that.
How many whys have shifted? Like how many?
That's a really good question, man. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7.
And these are massive changes, or
pretty much
of slide?
Yeah, massive changes in me and the business, and therefore my role in it and relationship to it.
Can we go first why to current why?
Well, as entrepreneurs and business owners, tell me if you think this is the same for athletes. Usually you start off because you've got a chip on your shoulder and something to prove. Entrepreneurship is a trauma response. Someone pissed you off at some point and you've got something to prove. And that's a useful energy to get you started. But what happens is 5 years passes, 6 years passes, 10 years passes, and you go, I'm succeeding, but I'm still plugged in and pissed off and operating from angst and ego and jealousy and frustration, and I'm not all that fulfilled. And so it's like you're operating off an unsustainable energy source. And so
it's good booster rocket, but you got to let go of it.
Perfect. That's the perfect analogy. That's the perfect. Once you're in orbit,
yeah, you got to let go of it.
Change your fuel.
Yeah, I had a good friend that he carried that with him with his relationship with his mum.
Right.
And she passed away, and he was still holding on to the anger. I was like,
yeah,
you got to let it go, man.
Yes.
It's not going to serve you now. He's like, yeah, it's motivated me to get to here. I'm like, got to let it go.
Yeah. And that's usually the main reason people hold on to that energy, because they know no other way than to drive themselves than from dissatisfaction. And so the transition for me, which I think is representative of the transition for a lot of people, is I had to transition from young, chip on shoulder, probably quite self-centered.
Where did the chip come from?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I think in my case it was both inspiration and dissatisfaction. So it wasn't all chip on shoulder. I was also very inspired.
Yeah.
Chips on shoulder, you know.
Like you said, anger and annoyance and I'm not good enough. That's like that's the shit that'll move the needle. Like you said at the start. 100%. There's a whole range of things, man. My parents ran a not-for-profit organisation when I was young. They would take youth at risk off the street and out of jails and from abusive homes, and they'd put them through a training program and place them into employment. And they deliberately choose the people from the most challenging of backgrounds. But even though they did that, they were the most successful at what they did in the country. And so they were very good at it. They were reliant on government funding. Government changed the way they issued capital out to not-for-profits. Breaking the cycle was unsuccessful in getting funding under the new regime. Organisation collapsed. And so I was probably about 5 when it started. I think I was probably 11 or 12 when it collapsed. That pissed me off because my whole upbringing was seeing people come into an environment literally half dead or out of jail for the 4th time, turn their entire life around, and then go and get meaningful employment. Like a couple of them were living with me and my family, my parents. Like it was this big family that did a lot of really good stuff. And then, so as a 12-year-old, my thought process was, who decided money was better spent elsewhere? Obviously, you don't understand governments and funding and even capitalism at that age. But that was my primary question. And to be honest, it probably still is my primary question. I was going to say, like, what's changed since then?
Exactly. It's the same stuff, right?
Yeah.
If not worse.
Yeah.
So there's that. My brother growing up was probably the person I was closest to. His name was Tom. He passed away. He was 21. I was 18. He passed away as a result of drugs. He didn't OD. He asphyxiated. So, that probably stoked the fire. And then probably just the general feeling of inadequacy and insecurity that we all have, as human beings. I think it's a large part of the human condition. We all walk around thinking that we're the only insecure ones. We all walk around thinking that we're the only one with self-doubt or with imposter syndrome or that's worried about how we're being perceived. And then, when you have enough meaningful conversations with people and you do enough research on it, you realize that every single person feels the same way. In Buddhism, they don't call it your mind, they call it the mind, because it's representative of all of our minds do the same stuff. We've got different personalities and different preferences and all of that kind of stuff. But everything your mind does, anxiety, struggling to sleep, wanting to eat lollies instead of vegetable, or everything your mind does that you wish it didn't do, everybody's mind does. And so if you look at a champion of an industry, it's not that they had it easy, or more often than not, it's not that they were privileged. It's that they learned impulse control. They learned to discipline themselves. They did the reps consistently enough and for long enough to get brilliant. But that takes a hell of a lot of discipline.
Just time and reps.
Time and reps.
I was going to ask you, how close were you with your brother?
Very, very. Yeah, he. We were very similar as well. He was smarter than I was and funnier than I was, and he was probably even more independently minded than I am. And so it's unfortunate that he passed away for many reasons, but in this context, I think, particularly knowing what I know now, I think he would have been an exceptional entrepreneur had he have found a path and a purpose and something he was happy to do the reps for. Yeah. So, yeah, we were very close. We did everything. We worked together. We went out together. We socialized together. We did drugs together.
I just relate because I've got an older brother that's similar age gap as well.
Right.
And it's funny, parents would always ask me how they make a good athlete. And I say, have 2 kids and focus on the second one. And it's pretty much how I look at that is from a young age, as much as you probably got along with your brother and you loved each other, he'd probably beat you up a little bit. He'd probably steal your food. He'd probably do all this different stuff to get under your skin, but it like creates a certain level of resilience in you. And as much as like he can be your best friend, he can be your worst enemy, but it's like that relationship and that bonding you do levels you up as a person because you pretty much have a mentor, even if it's subconscious, from the moment you're born.
100%. And that's the other thing to your question earlier around chip on shoulder. I was one of 3 boys, and again, we had an exceptional relationship. But I remember at a very young age, for me, I always had an unconscious desire to differentiate myself to get my parents' attention. And it's almost kind of embarrassing saying that, but again, as you say, any child that's one of 3 had the same unconscious desire. They might just not have languaged it that way yet. And so that was the other driving force. So yeah, have 2 kids and focus on the second, I think is spot on.
Most of the time when I see high level athletes, they're either second or third.
Interesting.
In the thing. It's just, you learn, because to be good at anything, I always tell people, like, you need to learn how to lose before you learn how to win.
Yes.
And anyone that succeeds instantly, they don't have that struggle, they don't have that character building process of actually getting to the next point.
Yeah.
So I saw growing up a lot of kids that were quite successful early, whether because they just matured earlier, they were bigger, stronger. When you're 15, 16, if you got a kid that's matured, like he's a lot stronger and bigger.
Yeah.
And I saw this when I was racing, when I started competing, there was this kid and he won everything from like a young age.
Yep.
And then everyone kind of caught up to him. Everyone matured, everyone got a bit older. And then when we were about 17, 18, when everyone obviously grew, he started losing.
Yep.
And he quit the next year.
Yep. Yep.
And it's like, you don't, I love seeing kids when they're getting into racing. I've done a bit of mentoring.
Yeah.
Kids that are getting 3rd and 4th and 2nd consistently.
Yeah.
That's the kid I want to work with, because obviously there's examples of like prodigies that come through that can win, and if they've got kept winning, if they've got a good family behind them, they've got good values and they actually understand. But most of the kids that I want to work with are ones that have failed early.
So that example goes right back to what we're talking about at the top of this conversation, where we're talking about people talking about stuff that they haven't yet done, and it's kind of like a shortcut. I see that as exactly the same as what you just said, which is the kid at 15, he had this huge advantage, but it was an unearned advantage. He hadn't done the reps. He hadn't gone through the process. He hadn't learned how the fuck to fail. And so then when he starts failing, he's gone. What a lot of people don't understand is that winners lose more than losers, right? And that's the secret. That's the, it's like, this might be the most unmotivating podcast ever, because the secret is hard work, not being afraid to lose, and sticking with the reps throughout the inevitable pain. And that's the conversation no one wants to have. But that's the truth. Whether you're a high-level athlete, I'm a high-level entrepreneur and investor. We're both saying the exact same thing, even though we both came from extremely different fields, right? It's just the truth.
It's just simple stuff, though. It's like lose fast, learn quick.
Yeah. That's another interesting principle that that never ceases to amaze me, is the more advanced and experienced someone becomes, the more they obsess about the basics. In business, for example, when I started out, I thought the businesses that scale must be doing something really fancy and they've figured something, but the further you go, the more you realize through your own failures and successes, the businesses that do well just do the boring stuff consistently. Great businesses are great because they do the basics well at scale. And so I even observe in myself these days, if I have a lot of entrepreneurs come to me and they might be pitching me for money, or we might be in a coaching session or whatever it might be. And even what we're talking about now, I find that the further I've gone, the more I catch myself purely and only bringing people back to basics. Do you find it's the same in sport?
100%.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking as I was writing notes for this podcast, I used to train at this gym, and I had a coach and we would do very similar workouts.
Right.
And again, the boredom would come in. We've done this workout before.
Yeah.
But I was getting stronger. the results were coming.
Exactly.
But when you're doing deadlifts every week or squats every week, and it's just like this repetition,
Yeah.
you go, nah, there's a better way. And especially, I think, especially in today's day and age, where you'll go online and you'll see someone, I don't know, in a high altitude tank doing I don't know, whatever it may be. And it's like, oh, they've found a little like
The
1%.
shortcut. Yeah.
Which is not there. It's
No.
like you want to become better at something. There's X amount of reps you have to do to get better at it. And that's where we come back to that boredom's the enemy of mastery.
Yes.
And no one wants to be like, everyone wants to become a master at something, but they don't want to go through the boredom to actually get to it. And I don't think and that's something that I don't think gets told to a lot of athletes, entrepreneurs, that you're picking something that you have to love that much that you have to do it to a point that you'll probably hate it.
Yes.
And people don't want to commit to that.
Yes.
And it's funny now because I started doing photography when I got into this space and I was enjoying it. And someone's like, do you want to turn it into a job? And I'm like, no, that's for me. I'm going to protect that because it's like, there's certain things that I think you need to protect for you.
Yes.
And if you have something, whether it's an art form or a hobby or whatever it may be, you've got to go, do I want to do this to the point where I will not like it anymore? Or do I just want to have this thing for me?
Yeah.
And
that's
you've got
wise.
and you've got to divide things up and go, I know I could get it good enough that someone would pay me for this.
Yeah.
But then do you find this with anything that you do, as soon as someone puts a dollar figure on it, it alters how you view it yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same. It's over the last 20 years, I might have had hobbies or something, and someone goes, you should make a business out of that. And my response is exactly what you just said, which is, the majority of my life is business. This is a personal hobby that I'll keep for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's something that you then don't have to obsess over getting your reps up. You can just enjoy doing it. And that's freaking important because rest and rejuvenation and enjoying life is a critical component of being able to sustain high performance. And so, I think protecting hobbies is a really wise thing to do.
But there's also a point where if you're not going to go into something you're not passionate about, but I think you just need to have that conversation with yourself whether, okay, is this for me or is this for money?
Exactly.
Is this for other people?
Exactly. Like education is a huge passion of mine, has been since I was 6. I've now got a 2-year-old daughter. I'm definitely not going to send her to school. And so I probably will create one.
I saw you talking about that with the schooling system.
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest issue with the schooling system is now? And what would you do to change it? We got time.
Okay, so if I use my daughter, for example, Ariella was born in 2023. If she started school and followed the traditional path, she would finish university in 2045. 2045. We have an education system that was literally designed and built 200 years ago that is not teaching what's relevant anywhere near it in 2025, much less 2045. Because the rate of change in the world has been increasing for the last 50 or 60 years, and the rate of change in the world is significantly outpacing the rate of change in traditional education, namely because there hasn't been much at all. And so if you look at the studio we're shooting this in right now, relative to what this studio would have had to look like 50 years ago. It's a very different
Wouldn't
room.
even been here.
Exactly. Yeah. We'd have to have
been a radio shack somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if you look at offices relative to an office 50 years ago, if you look at a car relative to 50 years ago, or a plane relative to 50 years ago, they look completely different.
Do you also see
the
this
classroom?
Same.
Looks exactly the same today as it did 50 years ago, and that's symbolic of the underlying model of education that it represents. It hasn't changed.
Even with I was going to say, and the biggest factor that's probably going to come into play now as well, obviously with AI coming in, it's like how many of those traditional jobs that are taught at school are completely obsolete anyway.
Oh, dude. And so this is the thing. Even absent AI, my view would be consistent with what I'm saying now. With AI, it only amplifies it times 100. Like, you got to understand, my daughter will probably never learn to drive a car. because fully autonomous vehicles will be the norm 5 years from now. And so people will still drive cars, but it will be like
Playing records.
Exactly. Choosing to ride a horse even after Henry Ford popularized the motor vehicle. People still rode horses, but it was no longer the primary mode of transportation. That's what's going to happen to driving cars. And so, I mean, she'll learn to drive if she wants to, but chances are she won't, because, you know, she'll be 16 in 14 years. By that point, 98% of transport will be fully automated. And so we have this thing in the human brain where we look at the future and our reference point for it is the past. And so we envisage our children growing up in a world that's similar to the one that we grew up in. And I can tell you right now that if you have a child of any age, the world that they grow up in will be unrecognizable from the world that you grew up in. So what does that mean? Where does that leave you? Firstly, if you can avoid it, don't put them in school. And then you go, okay, well, given the rate of change is only increasing going forward, what should we teach them? The number one skill to learn is the ability to learn. Because it's the people that can endure the 20 hours to learn the task, to learn the thing, that can go on and do it and reinvent themselves and be confident that as things change, I'll be okay because I can adapt. That's the most important skill over the next 20 years. And traditional education isn't going to do that.
Touching on that though, this is my biggest probably bite back to that is social connection.
Yes.
And that's something that I think along with AI and social media and everything is already like there's a big divide getting pulled apart.
Yeah.
So one thing, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
I don't see that schooling system right now as being, okay, that's obsolete, get rid of
100%.
it.
Yep.
But how do you actually get kids together and actually work and play and be in an environment where they can actually have social interaction on a normal level?
You just design it. And so if I sit here now and if I was to be the kind of parent that was going to send Ariella to school, my biggest concern, the biggest risk factor in her well-being, the biggest risk factor in her reaching adulthood, and the biggest risk factor in her not having her confidence or sense of self damaged would be socialization at school. It would be the thing that most troubled me. For me, it's one of the main reasons I wouldn't send her there. And then I would also apply that to she would also pick up the values of the school. Now, there are some great schools, and I'm a huge advocate of teachers. My mum was a teacher. In some ways, you know, I'm a teacher. Teachers are exceptional, and you know the problem is the system that they're beholden to, and the problem is they're not paid enough, and the problem is the right incentives aren't in place to incentivize better teaching. And so the socialization with the kids at school, I think, is the biggest risk factor, and the unconscious transference of the values of the traditional school system, whatever school she might be in, would be the second biggest risk factor. And so what I would do about that is I would you can find groups, because here's the thing. 10 years ago, very few people were homeschooling. It's a huge rising tide at the moment. So more and more people are doing it. And the question you asked in terms of what do you do for socialization is the number one thing that people ask when you talk about not sending kids to school. And so in any local area, as of, let's say, 2 or 3 years' time, there'll be thousands of kids not going to school, looking to socialize with one another, but you'll be able to choose and be more deliberate and be more intentional about who they socialize with and what they're doing when they're socializing. The other aspect for Panda and I is we are a little bit fortunate in that because we run businesses, she can hang out with us a lot, but I would still choose to homeschool her and be more intentional about socialization, even if that wasn't the case.
Yeah. Because I see people when I went to a private school and there was people that were actually boarding there. And like that's obviously another element to being really far away.
Yeah.
But there's also a certain level of independence that came with that. And I'd noticed in the kids that were boarding, they just seemed like they had a bit of a better understanding of the world just in the fact that they had to fend for themselves a little bit more.
Yep.
And it's like the whole, you put someone else out in the cold, they figure out ways to get warm.
Yes.
So I just wonder with that, with the homeschooling, it's one of those things where you are in the nest a lot. Yeah, I think like I know a lot for me when I was growing up, we traveled a lot. I was with my family, but getting out of the nest, going around and seeing places and being on your own a little bit more in terms of like socializing definitely matures you. And that's one thing I can agree 100% with the homeschooling, but it's like, how you get that separation and mum and dad aren't always there to save you kind of mentality. And I think that would be the biggest battle for me if I was to have children and work that.
As I kind of future pace Ariela's life, I think we can co-design challenges and adventures with her that would be even more enriching than going to school or boarding in school.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, is the world is a big place and there's so much to do and explore and experience. And, you know, if she just stayed at home and we kind of wrapped her in cotton wool, that would be a recipe for disaster. But firstly, if in the home you design the environment such that they have all of the love and the safety and the nurturing that they need, but they're also held to a standard. And so, you know, a friend of mine who follows a similar model to the one I'm talking about now in terms of homeschooling and kind of getting them around the business and all that kind of stuff, he offered them a job and he had them sign a contract and they earn $35,000 a year. And they get the $35,000, so they see it in their bank account. Then he takes it out and he puts it in investments for them, and then they earn the residual income from the investments. And so, and the contract is a contract. The contract has them doing, and they're looking at it going, Jesus Christ, do I have to do this? Like, yep. If you want the money, but if you don't have the $35,000, you got to go find the money somehow. Like, I'm rich, we're not. Yeah. You know, like, you know. And so. I think if you can start from first principles, like start with a blank canvas as opposed to viewing life and development through the lens of traditional schooling and go, if there were no rules, how would you design a path of development? I think that's one good example that sees them be employed, take responsibility for outcomes, earn their own money, but in this instance, they only get the money that's earned from the investment. They don't actually get to spend their salary. If they want something, they buy it. Yeah. Encourage them to travel, encourage them to take on challenges, encourage them to start businesses, encourage them to take on projects. There's a lot that you can design and do to foster all of those things, I think, in a way that's more conducive to accelerated development.
What do you think the biggest thing for these kids around that age when they'd start getting, what do you think the biggest reason why there's a lack of discipline in just, I guess, a broad umbrella of today's youth and like in trying to get jobs and trying to better themselves?
There's a few things. Too many kids today are brought up to believe that everything is easy and should be easy. I see this even in people our age. It's like they have the belief that I should be happy all the time. I should be fulfilled all the time. Should be rainbows and Skittles all the time. I should be having fun all the time, right? And you and I both have a lot of lived experience in that. No. If you want to become somebody of value in any field and you want to build any success for yourself, you better rewire your relationship with difficulty because that's going to be the majority of your experience. And that message isn't conveyed nearly enough. And so you get people coming out of university thinking they should be the CEO. And so there's a disconnect between expectation and reality. I think the other thing is that it unfortunately has become a little bit easier for kids to not have as much faith in the traditional system as our parents would have. And so, you know, our parents are probably 70, 80, whatever it might be, born in, let's say, 1950. If you went to school and then you went to university or college, you were pretty much guaranteed a really high-paying job. And college was a great deal back then. University was a great deal back then because the price was relatively low and the quality and the integrity of the institutions, they were the center of the world's knowledge sources. Today, everything I just mentioned has changed. The price of university has gone up more than any good or service in the world since 1980. And they've just become businesses seeking profit. They are no longer custodians of the world's knowledge. If anything, they're lagging significantly. And because they're protected, given the system they operate within, there's no consequence for them for lagging. And so they operate in a non-competitive environment. The government gives them money. Students will come regardless. And so when you don't have to be competitive, you get old and stale and you decay from the inside.
Paid by the hour, not for the output.
Yeah, exactly. And so the equation used to make sense for our parents. And genuinely, like it was a really good deal. And you build a really good – and then you go buy property. You know, property was like, I don't know the exact numbers, but it was like 4 times the average annual wage. Today's property is 20 times the average annual wage. And so relative to how much we're earning, property's become a lot more expensive. And so now I'm really careful in saying all of that because I see a lot of people whinging and complaining about all of that as if it's doom and despair. I don't think it's doom and despair. You can still play the game. You can still win. If anything, in many ways, it's gotten easier to develop yourself and learn and win and be successful in whatever field you choose. So it's not doom and despair. But if you go through traditional schooling, for example, and traditional university, for example, and like now go to university for 5 or 7 years, and by the way, spend $300,000 doing that. Well, what does that get me? Well, you know, you'll be able to drive Ubers afterwards. It's like, fuck, the equation's not there anymore. And so again, that's okay, provided you receive the message as to how to play according to the new blueprint, whereas everybody's still playing according to the old blueprint, and that's incredibly uninspiring today.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
I guess this comes back as well when you said you had your little girl, and you can look at it 2 ways. Fuck, I just had a little girl, I'm not going to have as much time, I'm not going to be able to
100%.
save as much money. And it's like, just because something's hard doesn't mean you can't accomplish it and do better.
100%.
It's like you've got to look at the same challenge 2 ways. Okay, I'll just make more money.
Yeah.
I'll just work harder. I'll figure it out.
Exactly.
And I think like you're saying with the whole housing cost of living in general, that's all rising, and people can look at that 2 ways. Oh, how am I going to be able to afford anything? I'm like, okay, what can I do to make my life better?
Exactly. And the fact that you're coming up in a generation that's, you know, not all that disciplined and has some weaknesses is your advantage. It's never been easy to win because everybody's soft. And to your point around the daughter thing, it reminds me of, you know, a good friend of mine, Dan Martell, talks about, he's like, dude, if you're single and 25 and you've got an 8-pack, I don't really care. Show me the dude who's 42, has a wife, has 2 kids, and runs a business that has a 6-pack. I respect that guy because you could have been if you put on 10, 20 kilos, you would have been excused for it. Oh, it's fine. He became a dad. That's what happens. You know, you run out of time and you don't sleep, and he also runs a business. You have all the excuses in the world. Show me the person that had the excuses and still chose to win. That's the person I respect.
Yeah. Excuses can hold you back massively.
Dude, and they're becoming so fucking prevalent, particularly with all this woke bullshit that goes on in today's culture. We have a culture where it's almost like the more I can substantiate my victimhood, the more virtue I carry. And that's the opposite to the game that you want to play if you want to be a happy and functioning and successful adult.
Yeah. I had a spell of that where I had a spinal cord injury. And
Right.
I tell you what, a spinal cord injury is your get out of jail free card. You're invited to a
Dude.
dinner, spinal cord injury. You got someone, spinal cord. Like no matter what, like you trust me, they will not ask a second
Don't
question.
get out of bed, spinal cord injury.
Exactly,
Right.
but it's a slippery slope playing that victim card because you can use it whenever you want. And like you said, that's not how you grow. That's not how you level up. And I found myself, like I saw myself being that person. And it scared the shit out of me. I fucking hated it. And I honestly, even for a long time and probably now, it's like physically I'm pretty good now. I've got a few little niggles and issues, and I don't think anyone that has a spinal cord injury is ever exactly the same person they were before, but I've accepted that fully.
Yeah.
But the emotional side of not wanting to show up in any way because of how people were treating me.
Yeah.
And you become this injured, weak, sad person.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this publicly before, but I pretty much started this business so people would stop talking about my spinal cord injury and start talking about my business.
Wow.
Because I got so tired of being like, how are you? How are you going? And I look at you with puppy dog eyes and are you all right? And I couldn't live in that world. So I was like, all right, challenge, something else, business.
Right.
Then people say, how's the business going? Yeah, it's great.
Right.
So you come like chip on the shoulder kind of thing and working out of trauma.
Yeah.
This whole business got built. Like I was in here probably a couple months after the injury. Probably should have still had a fucking spinal.
Should have been in bed.
Yeah, neck brace on or something. I'm gluing foam to walls, and it's that
On the ladder.
yeah, and it's that mindset, and it was like I couldn't turn off the athlete mindset or that like just like
it's the champion's mindset.
yeah, like it's ego as well. It's definitely like looped into that. But it's just like I want to be seen as someone that isn't what I was being seen as.
But here's the thing, man. Again, this new age culture demonizes ego as if no one should have any. That's not the right way to look at or interpret ego. Ego integrated is incredibly healthy.
Should steer you in a direction.
100%. It's that rocket fuel that we spoke about earlier. And you evolve from ego being better than others or a comparative ego to this challenge won't define me nor defeat me. That is ego, and that is the healthiest fucking thing on the planet. It's crazy, man. It's there's a couple of things that spring to mind as you talk about that. Firstly, that's champion's mindset, right? And I find that friends with Michael Klim, famous Australian swimmer, or Miele, he's a Aussie hip hop artist, or 360, we both know. And so often these people that rise to the top of their field outside of business, when they come into business, they succeed because it's the same behaviors and it's the same principles, pretty much everything we've discussed here, that make you successful regardless of the fucking endeavor. And then the second thing is that you would have had every excuse not to do any of that, and you chose to do it anyway. To my observation, the people that are the most successful, impactful, whatever word you want to use, often have the hardest stories and the biggest excuses. Like the person that comes to my mind that I did a lot of study around back between probably 2010 and 2014 is Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela obviously was a black South African that grew up under apartheid in South Africa. And apartheid was a objectively terrible thing that they were fighting against. And in order to fight against it, they needed to develop methods that were unconstitutional and sometimes violent in order to change the system. And so he went to jail as a terrorist for 27 years. In that 27 years, not once did he, well, I wouldn't say not once. Towards the end of that sentence, he was negotiating with the government of the time for his release. And he came out and he didn't hold any anger towards his oppressor. 27 years he spent in prison as a terrorist. 5 years later, he was the first black president of South Africa. And so, you can go into South Africa's history since then, and there's so many complicating and complex factors to the country and the culture of South Africa. But what I'm trying to hone in on is Mandela's story and Mandela's spirit and how it overcame excuses that any reasonable person would have, like, you come out of prison, just relax, mate, go spend time with your family. We all would have thought that was perfectly reasonable. But to continue the fight, to not carry anger, 27 years in prison, and then become the first black president 5 years later, I don't have any fucking excuses. You know, there's nothing that can happen in my life could be nearly as challenging as what he went through.
Do you follow UFC at all?
I do.
You know, Alex Volkanovski,
Yeah.
who won the title the other day, and he had a line, he said, adversity is a privilege.
100%.
And it's like in that sense of like, you've almost got to get motivated by hard times. Because you know it's like, this just adds to the story if it does work out how I believe it will.
Yes. Yeah.
It goes, okay, look, like now if I win, how much better does that look?
Exactly.
Like, and you've got to think that. Like,
You do.
You've got to think that at rock bottom when you go through a point where you go, man, this is making the story better.
Exactly. The bigger the challenge, the bigger the hero.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, unfortunately, I think it's inverse to how a lot of people think today, which is, you know, it's almost like regardless how easy you make it, they still won't put in the effort. It's the inverse of what we're talking about now, which is champion's mindset is, I don't care how hard you make it, I am going to make it.
Yeah, I think it's belief and not accepting no.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest thing, and just showing up.
100%.
Showing up again and again 100%. And again when it's hard. One thing that I've always battled with, and still to this day do, is this difference between you're in your 20s, go and live life, you don't get time back, and then build a stable life, set yourself up, work hard at business. And those are conflicting thoughts that pull either direction every single day of my life.
Yeah.
It's, let's just go solo travel around Europe and not worry so much about...
How old are you?
Actually, 29, turn 30 tomorrow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude.
So...
It's incredible. Happy birthday as well.
Thank you.
That's amazing. It's amazing you're so young.
Last day of my 20s, but...
Today's your last day of your 20s?
Yeah. Finishing here. But that's a constant thing where I'm like, there's part of me wants to go solo travel around, I don't know, wherever. Go book a plane ticket, end up in a different country, around different people, and just see what happens. Yeah. That's part of my life, like a direction that I can see my life going. And then there's also the build a business, set up, make sure you're set up for when you get older. Yeah. And those conflicting thoughts I tussle with on a daily basis. Yeah. And even after I finished competing racing, I had a lot of freedom, and I could have gone and probably done that without so much, I guess, worry or commitment. And then instead I decided to build a studio and start a small business, which even to this day, I'm like, my mindset is build it, set it up, let someone else run it. Yep. You can live off the income still, come 100%. Back, run it more if you want. Like that's where 100%. My head's at now. But it's also, as I'm building it, there's those more like enticing things. Oh, I could get more money here, or I could grow this, or I could do that. Yeah. Have you felt you've battled with that when growing a business to have that balance between either living your life in a different way, yes, and then also building a family and how that all intertwines? And
100%. So let me give you two seemingly contradictory thoughts, and I carry both of them. The first one is that there's a trade-off, right? And so if someone's 22, you've got two choices. You can spend the next 8 years until you're 30 partying and living life and traveling, and you'll get a whole lot of really good experience. You'll have a whole lot of fun. You'll meet a whole lot of great people. Or you can spend the next 3, 5, 8 years really knuckling down and building a business and making money and all of that kind of stuff. Now, if you do the first one, you'll get to 30 and you won't have the business and you won't have the income. That's the trade-off for the fun and the parties and the travel. Or if you start the business, you'll have the money and the success and the challenges and a few scars and a hell of a lot of experience, and you'll probably be really smart, but you won't have gone and partied and traveled as much as your friends. It's like, which one do you want? Which trade-off do you want? Because you have to... There's a price for everything, and the price is not negotiable. It's just about which price do you want to pay for which outcome? And so that's a really useful thought for me because, again, it's an inescapable reality of life. And so understanding it and languaging it that clearly helps me decide. The second and contradictory thought is, and I do think both are true, by the way, is that to an extent you can integrate the two. You could go 70 or 80% or even 90% business, but then you could, let me give you one example. Since 2014, I've probably traveled 2 to 3 months of the year, and I've always just chosen to do it June, July, August. Why? Because it's winter in Australia, and I hate winter. That was the extent of my thinking. Now, I built businesses, and I've failed and driven businesses into the ground, and I've succeeded, and I've scaled and exited businesses, and I've done all of that. And I've traveled. It's just that when I traveled, I'd stayed in nicer places than my mates did because I wasn't backpacking. I'm just being cheeky when I say that. But yeah, and so two contradictory thoughts are, number one, understand there's a trade-off to everything and be willing to pay the price. Number two, once you determine your path, think about how you can integrate enough of the other path such that you're happy and fueled as you pursue your primary path.
Would you go back and change anything though?
Nothing.
Wouldn't change anything?
Nah. Dude, because it's like anything. It's pay now, reap the rewards later. I spend every day only doing things that I really love and enjoy. Now, that's not sitting on beaches drinking cocktails. What I really enjoy is leaning into challenge and growing businesses and deepening my relationship with my wife and trying to do my best to be a great role model for my daughter, training at the gym, eating right, you know. And so pretty much all of my life is voluntary challenge, but that's what I enjoy.
Yeah, knowing yourself well enough to know what you need.
100%. And that gives me and it affords me the ability to live a life of, pretty much unrestricted freedom in a sense. Yeah. And so if you choose to work hard and you do it for long enough and you don't quit even when you probably should, you pay your dues, as we spoke about earlier, you deserve the benefits that come with that.
Because, it's like, did you want your dessert first or second?
Exactly.
In a way.
Yeah, that's a beautiful metaphor.
And I think I look at it, because again, it comes back to obviously knowing yourself well enough, but I missed out on a lot of partying, going out when I was younger.
Yeah, same.
And in the moment, I hated it.
Yeah.
I wanted to go hang out with my friends, wanted to build connections, wanted to do all this
But
stuff.
now you don't give a fuck.
Well, I used that time to train and become a
world champion,
world-class athlete that then got me to see the world. And it's,
Right.
I guess
Right.
what I'm saying, it's like in the moment, what you think is good for you might not actually be good for you.
So that dynamic that you just spoke about in terms of you're missing out on the parties, but you're training to become an athlete, is parallels the dynamic you were tabling a moment ago in terms of, do I want to build a business or travel? It's the same. It's the exact same dynamic.
Yeah, I can see in the future as well. One of my big things is I'm definitely an age where if I met someone and the whole idea of like settling down, kids and all that is a very realistic thing at this age.
Yeah.
And I also feel, yes, I could take it with me and go and travel, but I never want to hold resentment towards someone because of things that I hadn't done and I felt like I needed to do.
You won't care, man. You traveling the world with somebody you truly love is so much greater of an adventure than traveling the world and sleeping with different people. People say the same about like kids. Once kids come along, travel's harder. It is harder. It is harder. But as I said, I've traveled pretty much every year for a long time, 10 years, whatever it is. My daughter is 2. She's been to 8 countries. She's been on over 100 flights. When I'm traveling and I've got Panda there, who's the most exceptional person I've ever met in my entire life, and I've got my daughter there who's taking her first steps, do you think I give a fuck about what's happening at the nightclubs and like other it completely disappears into oblivion.
Yeah, I see that. I see that. Do you feel
So I don't think you'll ever hold any resentment. I mean, I'm not saying I think you should travel now and travel then. All I'm saying is, when you find the one, there's no longing for what was.
There's another mindset I've got. I feel like I'd find my person while traveling.
Probably.
That's something that I've like kind of cemented into my head, that I would find someone doing similar things that I'd be doing.
What's interesting about this sort of stuff is like sometimes, particularly somebody like you, is sometimes you have intuition around this sort of stuff and it can turn out to be quite prophetic, meaning like it feels like a thought you're having, but it is actually true and it is how it will pan out. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to watch this back in a couple of years. But yeah, you probably will.
What do you think the biggest thing your daughter's taught you?
Oh, Jesus.
I thought about this the other day because I was walking my friend's dog, and I was thinking as I was walking it, I was like, is this dog walking me or am I walking the dog? And it's like, how often do we think we're teaching the kid and the kid's teaching us? 100%. And it's like you go into situations where you'll think you're the one in control and you're like, they're running the show. We're just here to witness it and learn from it.
Yeah, well, they're definitely running the show. Yeah, she's the boss. What's the biggest thing she's taught me? I think I've become even. I mean, like, there's 1,000 things, but like the most fundamental one is probably she's taught me to become even more present and be even more appreciative and grateful for everything. Yeah.
I get that. Do you have to be out at a certain?
No. The other thing around that is that may be useful for some people listening to this, particularly if you're a young parent, is we think we have so much time with our kids. Really, you've got 18 summers. That's it. You've got 18 summers. And then really, you've probably got, I mean, up until they're, let's say, 1.5 years, rounded up to 2, there's not a lot of communication or feedback and stuff, you know, because they're obviously a baby. And so you've probably got from 2 to when they're 12, or maybe even 11, where you're the center of their world. And so it's really 10 years, 10 summers. And because you are pretty busy just being a parent, much less whatever you might do for career, time goes so fast. Like she's 2. It feels like we're in the hospital 2 weeks ago. You know what I mean? And so one thing that scares the shit out of me is waking up in, let's say, 16 years and her room's empty because she's moved out and she's gone on to do bigger and better things. And it's like, you won't have toys scattered everywhere. You won't have crayons fucking drawn on the wall. All the things that right now you might think are annoying and frustrating. And, you know, I'll be able to walk out the door without doing, you'll just be able to walk out the door. But that's sad. Like, and so it's all of the challenges and it's all of the things that we might be frustrated by when they're babies and kids. They're the very things that we will miss one day. And so, yeah, I try and spend every moment, or as many moments as possible, in gratitude and appreciation for that reason.
I think once you do, like you said, you break down time into snippets and then you go, okay, I was doing this the other day with my grandparents because I moved up here. They live down in Victoria.
Yes.
And I thought about it. I was like, I might see them twice a year.
Yes.
Each time's maybe an hour long.
Yep.
They're this age.
Yep.
How many more times? That's okay, 2 times a year for the next 10 15 years.
Yep.
Who knows
so
how
you're
long?
seeing them 20 more times.
Yeah.
Yep. And so you draw 20 boxes up on the wall and every time you see them, you cross one off. That's a really useful way to think because it forces one to confront their mortality and the impermanent nature of life.
once you break down the fact that, okay, you only have this small amount of time, and it's always interesting because I had a person came and recorded a podcast and she was talking about she had terminal cancer and how it changed her perspective on her life. And again, appreciating a moment.
Yeah.
And like, we all forget, like, we're all going to die.
100%.
And we have no idea when that's going to come.
100%.
Absolutely zero idea. Like, just because you went in and saw a doctor and he said, okay, you've got X, which they don't really know exactly. They've got a rough estimate still. And obviously it's probably going to be sooner rather than later. But within that, it's like, okay, you have no idea about this thing. And a guy that races motocross recently passed away in an accident. He was, I think he's probably 27, 28.
I think I got a mate that knows him.
Yeah.
Do you know Pruddy?
Pretty no.
No, anyway, yeah.
I think guys, I'm pretty sure Joel Evans was his name.
Yeah, yeah.
And just, I didn't know him personally, but friends of friends and all
same.
interconnected.
Yeah.
But stuff like that, like you don't know.
Yeah.
And like you said, sometimes it's good to put things down on paper or see them and go, I'm probably only going to see my grandparents for maybe a total of 30 more hours.
Yes.
In my entire life.
Yeah.
And go, fuck, that's not very long.
Yeah.
You're gonna appreciate those hours more or less now.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can pretty much break that. Like, how often do you have a really close friend that suddenly you don't see them for 6 years,
100%.
5 years, and you didn't know that?
Yeah, yeah.
When you said goodbye to them, it wasn't, oh, I might bump into you. You don't know, but then it's like, fuck, it's actually been that long.
Yeah.
And you realize that, yeah, people get busy, life happens.
Yeah.
Your understanding of it, but it doesn't take away the fact that it's still moving quite fast.
100%. One of the main quotes that I've been thinking about recently, and I've voiced this out loud to anybody, is, I don't know who said it. It might have been Carl Jung. He said, the fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom. And what I think he meant by that is understanding your own immortality and understanding that things can change on a dime. It's, fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom is something I think about a lot, because particularly since becoming a parent, it's that you do have a sense of the fragility of life, particularly the fragility of your child. And so you do, whether you call it fear of God or fear of life or fear of the unknown, it doesn't matter what language you use. But whereas I think about 10 or 15 years ago, I was just so blissfully ignorant. And so there was probably a lack of wisdom there. Or somebody that's just catching up with their grandparents but hasn't actually done the math. They're kind of blissfully ignorant. But it's not like we're living in fear. I don't live in fear. I don't let it envelop me, and I don't let it change my behavior for the worse. If anything, I use it as fuel to be grateful and to live more of my life.
It's more living in understanding.
Exactly. It's the fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom. I think it's...
What's your relationship with death?
That's a very good question. I definitely have not come to accept it, particularly right now, because my relationship with life is and has been improving so dramatically. I saw an interesting question the other day. It was, what's the opposite of suicide? Like, there must be, and there is no concept or word that I can think of, but it's an interesting thought experiment. What's the opposite of suicide? It's like, so, somebody chooses to end their life. What's the opposite to that? It's like you literally make a decision in one moment that you are going to live so relentlessly and so passionately and so lovingly and so present, so fulfilled and so grateful and so disciplined and doing all, you're just going to lean in and you're going to fucking go for it. That's the opposite. And I feel like I kind of ticked into that mode when she was born.
Did you ever have like a low point to reference off from the bottom to that point?
Oh, yeah. I've been through some astronomically hard times from a family perspective and a business perspective and all that kind of stuff. And so that's the other thing is I've been...
Did you think about that moment when you're on that high? Like where I've come from?
Yes, all the time. because it provides the contrast. Again, 20 years ago, there was probably less contrast, right? And so you tend to not appreciate things as much. But over the last 20 years, there's been some extreme challenges, and even over the last 10 years, I could probably say 3 or 4 of them sucked. And so it provides beautiful contrast for when things go good. And it also motivates you to stay disciplined, to put in the dues to keep them good.
Do you find, I just got a quote here and it just says, the most broken people wear the prettiest masks.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I like to call it a mask because I think it's you.
Yeah.
It's not you're hiding something, but it's like there's some scars and shit under there. But I normally meet people that have been through a lot of shit.
Yeah.
And they're more or less my people.
Definitely.
Because there's depth in there.
100%. Yeah. So I interpret that quote 2 ways. The most broken people wear the most beautiful masks. It's like, if you think of people in Hollywood, for example, there is a lot of broken people who haven't done the work and are wearing the mask. Yeah. There's a lot of people in Gold Coast and Sydney like that as well. Yeah. But then the other side of that coin is there's a lot of people that have been broken that have done the work to repair and reparent and regrow themselves into a significantly better version of them than the one they were prior. They're your people. Yeah.
There's a method. I saw this thing where you have terracotta pots.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was just thinking.
And I can't think that it was a Japanese saying when they break.
Yeah.
They put them back together. They put them back together with gold.
Yeah.
And it's the whole idea that it's like this is even better than it was before.
100%. Yeah. And another quote that's similar to that is the cracks is where the light the cracks are where the light enters.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful metaphor that summarizes the experiences that I've had, at least. Is it's the cracks that end up being the biggest gifts. Yeah.
It's funny, like, why do you think that when we say all this, and this has been said over and over and over and over again, but then you get because it's all the stuff we're saying is great to say.
Yeah.
But it's like, why do you think? Because there's so many people now that get in that and they just, for whatever reason, it's like you can't see the light when you're at the start of the tunnel and it's fucking dark. And obviously in Australia and around the world, there's so many people that suicide is massive. It's gotten higher. It's like, how do you kind of reach those people that are in that point and kind of like give them that message that it's like, this might not look like it now, but this was probably the best thing that's ever going to happen to you. Because this gives you the foundation to become the person you should always have become.
The answer to that question is what you're doing right now, which is you're giving a platform to a message from yourself that needs to be heard and adopted more broadly. Because, again, it comes back to the culture that we live in, right? We live in a culture where everything should be easy and I should feel happy all the time, and if I don't, there's something wrong with me and I'm insecure and everyone else is great and what's wrong with me? And it's all just a misunderstanding of reality. It's a misunderstanding of the human condition. And so the more you can communicate fundamental truths that are really constructive, the more you'll reach people. It's like you've set up this business here, right? You will reach and impact more people with your marketing than you will with your business, because you'll probably reach tens of millions of people with conversations like this through your channels and the business's channels. The business is just a way to kind of put food on the table, but we need to make truth louder. I probably do need to wrap, man, because we've got a guest out there.
You got another guest coming in?
At 2.
All right, I'll leave. Yeah, I saw the time before. I was like, I'll ask you. Like, no, we're fine. I'll ask you one more question. We'll finish on that. Yeah. When you're dead and gone, how do you want to be remembered?
I don't really care. I used to think a lot about that. I don't think a lot about it anymore. I want to be somebody that loved my wife in such a way that made her feel safe and nurtured and seen and gave her the best possible life she could have lived. And I want to have been the best example for my daughter. Anything else, take it as a bonus.
Doesn't matter, hey?
Legacy is an interesting one. I think, we spoke about Mandela. Think about the impact that he had on the world, or Alan Turing, or, someone dies, they've fundamentally changed the world. We all kind of tweet about it, and then 10 minutes later we're back living our own lives. I used to use legacy as a guiding mechanism. I don't do that so much anymore, other than the legacy with my family.
Yeah. Nice, Jack. Well, appreciate that.
Legend D, what a conversation.
Went well.
Thanks, man.
Easy as.
Dude, that was sick.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right, man. I was enjoying the conversation. You did ask me. I was like, no, fuck, let's keep going.
Keep going.
Oh, so good.